Greetings and welcome to my YouTube channel. Pleasure to be with you again. Today our workshop is going to be about Chopin's Mazurkas, a subject very close to me, and it was very close to Chopin. He composed 58 of these wondrous concert pieces. Of course, they're dances in three-quarter time with special rhythms and accents, which we will examine today. There are three kinds of Mazurkas: a slower, more mellow style called a Kujawiak, a slightly more lively style called the Mazur, and livelier still is the Oberek, all based on traditional Polish dances. I'm going to play two Mazurkas for you now which contain all three of these styles. These were early Mazurkas composed when Chopin was still a youngster in Poland, listed as Opus 68 number 3 in F major and Opus 68 number 2 in A minor. They were published posthumously. Mazurkas, the soul of Chopin. He composed these pieces from the beginning of his life to the end of his life. Robert Schumann referred to them as cannons buried in flowers. Cannons buried in flowers, indeed. We're going to look at these very characterful pieces from the standpoint of rhythms and accents. Now, there are two kinds of mazurka rhythms. And why I chose this first piece, Opus 68, number 3, is because it has the characteristic mazurka. The dotted eighth followed by a 16th followed by a longer note. This is it. That's the mazurka. Yam, pa, pam. That's the mazurka rhythm. You also have another possibility, and that is the 8th note followed by a 16th rest, followed by a 16th note. I'll give you an example. Opus 24, number 1. It starts out with and the rest. You dotted 8th and the rest. These are the two kinds of mazurka rhythms, and you find them in most of the mazurkas. I want to say not all of them. There are a few that don't have mazurka rhythms at all, like Opus 24, number 2 in C major. But they're mazurkas because Chopin said they are. So there we are. But I also want to talk now, very importantly, we talked about rhythms and accents. Accents are terribly important in Chopin's mazurkas. An accent, dear friends, has no firm rule. It can appear on the first beat, second beat, third beat, all three, or none. I'll give you some examples. For example, in this piece that I just played here, this one, there are no accent marks shown in the Paderewski or Henley editions. In the Peters edition, there is an accent on the third beat, but you could go to the third beat anyway, as an agogic accent because it's the longer note, yam param param para, yam param, etc. You have to look at the music, dear friends. There's no hard rule or law about accents. I can give you an example where there's an accent on all three beats. Opus 6, number 2, bars 5 and 6. I'll point them out to you. I'll play it for you. Now, if you look at the music, there's an accent mark over each beat. So, look at the music, obviously, as a detective looking for clues, right? The script, the score is terribly, terribly important. Chopin was separated from his homeland. You know, he sought greater career opportunities in other European capitals. He spent some time in Vienna, then of course Paris. Paris was the center of all things cultural. Who was there? Everyone was there. Victor Hugo, Franz Liszt, Georges Sand, great aristocratic families, Polish aristocratic families. And he found his way there. He also spent some time in England and in Scotland. But his homeland was never far from his thoughts or his music. In a moment of loneliness, he wrote to a friend, "I go out most every night. I'm home never later than 11 or 12. Then I read, stare, play, cry, laugh, get into bed, extinguish the candle, and dream about home." the Polish earth. This is what Chopin's psyche and mindset was about. But you can personalize it to anything you want. It can be the French earth, the Kansas earth, the New Hampshire earth, Japan, anywhere. You should personalize these wondrous pieces for yourself. Rubato is the concept of lengthening or shortening a note or a phrase, right? In the case of Chopin, of course, Chopin was the quintessential romanticist. But his models, his big heroes, were Bach and Mozart. So he really was a classicist at heart. Chopin created the Polishness that we hear in his music. And you can internalize it to anything you want it to be. Dear friends, I would recommend that you record yourself, because you see, these pieces have to become yours. The more you play them, the more they will come into your system as far as rubato and stylistic things are concerned. I once had the pleasure of speaking to Vladimir Horowitz about mazurkas, and he said we used three words: color, color, color. Stayed with me. It's also very important, you know, how you begin a piece. You want to set a mood. You want to set a mood for whatever you're playing. And this is also important to the extent that in your study of mazurkas, I recommend go to YouTube. There's a lot on YouTube. There are competition contestants and winners. They are current pianists, current-day pianists. Look at historic recordings. William Kapell, wonderful mazurka player. Of course, Ignaz Friedman, Paderewski, Rubinstein. Oh my goodness, there's so much out there. Repeats. Chopin repeats himself a lot. In this G minor mazurka that I just played, Opus 24, number 1, this. You know what? It repeats 3 times. How about in 2 pages of music? So how about that we would play 1 repeat differently or 2 repeats differently? You don't have to. It's beautiful as it is, but it's something to consider, is what I'm trying to say. Everything I'm saying here, dear friends, to you are suggestions. They're my opinion. They're also years of performance practice. And so if I can be of some assistance, I'm very happy to do so. There was also an instrument in Poland at the time called the duda. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because Chopin took gestures from the countryside. He took gestures from the countryside and incorporated that in his music. For example, here you heard the duda would play a drone bass. You also had bass violins, right? Hear this. That's the duda. That was the duda. You have it more profoundly in other, the Opus 17, number 4 mazurka. Right? And what I showed you before. And yet Chopin took these rather basic gestures from the countryside and turned this into genius. You know, the mazurkas are shorter pieces, but make no mistake, dear friends, just because they're shorter pieces, Chopin spent the same amount of time perfecting and editing his works, even running to the printer after he already submitted scripts, as for anything else, all of his works. He was terribly, terribly concerned about this. Shorter pieces, sometimes the term miniatures is used. I'm not in favor of that term. Or easier. Chopin didn't compose easy pieces. He composed masterpieces. And every one of these is a gem. There were also other composers who used gestures from the countryside, the Hungarian Béla Bartók and Zoltán Kodály, Dvorak, you know. In fact, Bartók composed this, let's see, it was a third Romanian dance. It has the bagpipe in the left hand. Third Romanian folk dance of Béla Bartók. The other half of my heritage, my father was Polish and my mother was Hungarian. So we're playing a lot of Polish music. I better play something Hungarian. Lento, dear friends, lento, lento. You see a lot of lento in Chopin's mazurkas. Lento means slow, of course. We know what lento means, but letters that survived from Chopin's students indicate that lento was an indication for something slower, not necessarily dictionary slow. And I remember many years ago, I coached with Menachem Pressler, and I played this mazurka for him, and I tell you what he did. I'll just start just a few notes. He said, yeah, it's okay. Look, Marjan, let's have a step. Let's have a step in this. These are mazurkas. They're not for dancing, but they're still a dance form. They should hold together. You don't want it to be spreading all over, you know. Keep it together. And he stood in the bend of the piano, and he was acting as a metronome to keep it together, to keep it moving, you know. Schumann used the term schwebend, which means to flow. You want to flow. You want this to flow. You want it to move along. Profundity is not in slowness, in my opinion. I'm sorry, this is just me. Profundity is not in slowness. Find your own pace. You also should listen to these mazurkas vertically. In other words, you want to be aware of the left hand, but your right hand is the singer. Chopin adored opera and Bellini and Mozart. He even prescribed going to the opera for his students. So the singing line is very important in the right hand, but the left hand, you want to hear it, you want to taste it. Right? You want to hear the left hand, and your right hand, however, is the singer. I want to say also about dynamics. I'll ask you a question. What's the difference between a forte or a fortissimo in a mazurka and in a polonaise or scherzo or Beethoven sonata or anything? What's the difference between a forte in a mazurka and a forte in anything else? There's no difference. Forte is forte. Mazurka should have the full kaleidoscope of colorations. And this is what the composer would have wanted. You know, Chopin was in many ways orchestral in his writing, right? And he also included mazurka forms, now that I think about it, in other genres. For example, his preludes. I'll play one for you. Here you have a piece that's 16 measures, 8 of which have the mazurka rhythm. So which is it? Is it a prelude or a mazurka? It's a prelude, because Chopin said it is. It's in his collection of Opus 28 preludes. But it's in the style of a mazurka. You need to practice mazurkas the way you would practice anything else. There are trills, runs, jumps, arpeggios, octave passages, stretched chords. This needs to be practiced as if you would practice anything else. I would recommend that you look at the whole collection. If you don't play the whole, or read through it, you don't have to. Listen to it on YouTube or a CD that you may have. They're wondrous concert pieces. I mean, I don't know, I can't name one that I don't love. This is something that's also been very personal to me. Maybe because of my heritage, being Polish and Hungarian. My father was an opera singer, my mother as well. So yes, I feel very, very personal to these things. Since childhood, I always adored the mazurkas. I would also like to, about slow playing, lento mazurkas. You know, when you have a slower mazurka, it is not, or Chopin did not really intend these to be melancholic or to evoke sadness. Rather, remembrance and nostalgia, you know? I remember I used to take walks with my father, and we walked by a pine tree. And he would stop at this pine tree and say, Poland, or Krynica, or wherever he had been. You know, and again, you can personalize the thing, but we were in America. Happily, we were here. It's not something sad. It's nostalgia. Yes? And there's a big difference, because there's a term in Polish called żal, which means smiling through tears. But smiling is the operative term, not tears. So, there's one other thing that I do want to say very importantly, that I want to quell or quash, or whatever the right word is, age-old misunderstanding about Chopin's last work. Chopin's last work is said to have been the Opus 68 number 4 Mazurka in F minor. That is not correct. With due respect, more recent research by authors Jim Sampson and Alan Walker have proven that the Opus 67 number 2 Mazurka in G minor was actually Chopin's last piece. It was composed in August of 1849. Chopin died in October, as we know. The Opus 68 number 4 had been penned 3 years earlier and found in the diary of Auguste Franchomme, who was a famous cellist. I want to also indicate that on this video clip, we have attached the Opus 67 number 2, which I performed from my CD, as well as an article I wrote for Pianist Magazine on mazurkas. Dear friends, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Please write to me in the comments section. I'm happy to answer and discuss whatever you may have on your mind concerning the subject. As Frederic Chopin would say in his own language, bardzo serdecznie dziękuję. Thank you very much. See you again. Cheers.